Gonna start in a couple minutes here. Just gonna get everything together for the night. Alright guys, welcome to Stowing Progressive. If you're here on YouTube, that means you've passed the identity marks. They recently told me that they have me on the 18 and older verification now. They just recently sent that to me, so that's fun. So do me a favor, if you have the access, please go over to Twitch. Twitch is less regulatory to me. I will be doing more of my show on Twitch than on YouTube from here on out because Twitch doesn't censor me nearly like YouTube does. So thanks for joining me either way. If you don't have a Twitch or you don't want to join Twitch, you think it's most of the people I watch on YouTube I watch on Twitch too, so I've just kind of switched over personally. But it's more live. It's all about the live stream. It's not about so much watching videos. So some people don't dig that. So if you don't, I get it. is just not doing me well. They have not been doing me well. So I just got that notification today. So if you were watching me on YouTube, thank you for putting in your name and verifying yourself and email and whatever you got to do to watch my show now. Thank you for taking that time. If you're on Twitch, thanks for joining me as usual. I usually stream at midnight, so the first little bit here, I'm not expecting a lot of people. Maybe we'll gather some people tonight. I haven't even shared this out yet anywhere, and honestly, Sundays is usually my best show, so I'll just kind of let nature happen. We get what we get, right? I get mouth surgery in the morning, so not freaking out about tonight, freaking about tomorrow. Gonna be on soft foods for a week and have to stop doing this for a week. Alright, so with that being said, let's smoke one up. We're gonna start out with George Galloway. He's been just doing fantastic works, and I want to start out with him before we go to the interviews of the night. The interviews of the night we're going to be doing. Mathew Hoh talks with Status Quo. I have a couple-year-old clip of HEdges talking with Howie Hawkins. So we're doing two Green Party candidates, one from a couple years ago and one right now. And then for the old school clip of the day, I have some Jimmy Dore talking with Michael Wood Jr. about policing, police mentality. And so those of you who think that Jimmy Dore might be a I don't know, I guess he's getting some police apologists lately because of some of the comments he's made. So we'll watch this old video and kind of debunk that whole theory at the end of the second half of the show tonight. But to start out, like I said, we're going to do George Galloway's segment. Spark your joints, grab your drink, whatever your buzz of choice is. So we're going to get a buzzed on news on. And, let's talk some politics and hang out for a bit.
University of the airwaves, and
Cheers.
An open one. And there are no tuition fees. But there is something important tonight that we have never done before. And this is episode 150. You'll already know that we had to pause the extra mother of all talk shows on Wednesday nights, replaced by an entirely free Galloway show, which did fantastically well for a first sighting. 59,000 views on it, I think, and the podcast of it doing record business for free. And this is still free, and you can watch it if you can't pay or if you won't pay.
He's another, I just wanted to, he's talking about this now because he's another person that's been completely censored because he was on RT, so a lot of his old stuff has been deleted. And so he's working towards monetization on a new channel. And so, so I'm going to be watching George Galloway. I'm going to be watching Lee Camp. I'm going to be watching these guys who've been, HEdges, another person we're doing tonight. Because these people have been demonetized. These people have been censored massively. And we'll get to the censorship topic tonight, too. I believe I had one clip about censorship. We'll figure that out. All right, and I had another, that was the Taboo Table Talk with Brian Kareem, and that's the show by Krish Mohan. That one's about censorship. So we got a few things tonight. But yes.
But I'm asking you this week for the first time to make a donation by PayPal. The button will come up throughout the show so that we don't lose the mother of all talk shows. I'm currently seeking a sponsor for this show. If you are someone that could sponsor it, please get in touch with me. Or 10 sponsors, or 50. But until we get a...
you need a big-time Patreon. He's trying to do a professional level show, now all of a sudden on an independent budget. And I'm sure he's taking money out of the pocket for these first couple weeks, but now he's like, okay, I can't do this on my own. YouTube doesn't pay enough. Censorship and demonetization is constant. So now he is having to go the patron route.
Sponsor, the show is in danger, which would be a very great pity indeed, because the average audience of this show over the last month has been 1.1 million people, making it the biggest political show on the planet, at least on the English-speaking planet, which, as our rulers know, is, of course, the only part of the world that matters. And it's because we don't think like that we have managed to get viewers from every single part of the world. Our podcast is #1, I think, in Singapore, of all places. It came in at #1 in Tanzania last week, entered the charts at #1. So we are a prime broadcasting asset. We just don't have any money. So we need the viewers from now on to support this show if we're going to guarantee its success. If you all gave $10 each, we'd have enough to go nightly. If you all gave $5 each, ditto. If you gave $1 each, we'd be sitting pretty and secure for the rest of the year. That's what I'm asking you to do. Give what you can on PayPal. Now, as I said at the beginning,
And yeah, I mean, I'm never going to ask for anything. That's not the way. This is a outlet and not a cry for money or help. But these people are doing professional shows. I personally am unemployed at the moment, so I can't afford to do anything. But yeah, I mean, if you can help them out, especially the people that just got censored on RT. Like I said, Chris Hedges, him, Lee Camp, they have fantastic content, but they got completely deleted.
Imran Khan confounded the regime change operation in Pakistan with a boundary. He hit the Americans for 6, but they haven't gone away, you know. The background to this is important. My background to this is important. In front of me, you'll see 2 of my proudest possessions. I hope that you can see them. They are my awards from Pakistan, given over decades. I hold the 2 highest civil awards in Pakistan, the Hilal-e-Qaid-e-Azam and the Hilal-e-Pakistan. I have a deep and long association with that country. There they are, a wonderful Roman staff here, and they have pride of place in my household. I want to talk about Imran Khan. I'm not his party man. Let me make that clear. Partly because I spent decades, literally 3 decades, at the side of the late Benazir Bhutto, the then leader of the Pakistan People's Party. I even campaigned for her in 1988 when she became the first woman prime minister in the Muslim world. I was with her throughout. I spoke to her just hours before she was murdered in Rawalpindi in Pakistan when she returned yet again to contest a general election. So I'm not an Imran Khan party man, but I do absolutely respect him. I've had good relations with all of the leaders of Pakistan, with Benazir Bhutto, with Nawaz Sharif, and with Imran Khan. But Imran Khan is a friend of mine, and I respect him absolutely. If it wasn't for the day that he's just had in Pakistan and the hour that it is in Pakistan now, he'd be on the show here with me now, and I hope that he will be here next week. The United States National Security Council took a decision to regime change Imran Khan. Pakistan, a country of 220 million people, just like that, the National Security Council decided that their prime minister had to go. How's that for interfering in other countries' politics?
Seems like standard practice, right? Just fucking standard practice, unfortunately.
They conveyed it through Under Secretary of State Mr. Liu, L.U., who actually wrote it in a letter to the leaders of the opposition in Pakistan in terms, and I paraphrase, but only just a paraphrase. The letter said, that relations between the United States and Pakistan would not improve as long as Imran Khan remained Prime Minister, and that the only way that relations could improve is if an election were to return someone else as Prime Minister. As clear an intervention in someone else's sovereign affairs as it is possible to imagine. Unfortunately for the United States, this letter found its way into the hands of Imran Khan. The proximate reason for it is obvious enough. Pakistan has the closest possible relations under all prime ministers, indeed even under military dictators in the past, with the People's Republic of China, its neighbor. And that was difficult for a United States bent on regime change in Beijing to handle in the first place. But on the first day of the Russian military operation in Ukraine, where was Imran Khan? He was in Moscow,
Of course.
signing a deal with President Putin to receive at knockdown prices a guarantee of Russian gas and a guarantee of Russian wheat in order to heat his people, in order to feed his people, in order to keep the wheels of industry turning for his people. In other words, he was doing his job, his duty as the Prime Minister of Pakistan. But this double harness of a Pakistan in closer cooperation with Russia and in an ironclad alliance with China lit a fuse which they hoped, still hope, would lead to the explosion of Imran Khan's premiership.
I think this is a interesting segment, but looking at all these people, all these borders and relationships with countries, like when was Pakistan created? 78. When were when we look at each one of these countries, when was Ukraine created? When was Syria's borders actually created? You start to really come up with a lot of the answers of what's going on nowadays. These are false borders created by Britain, created by the Western alliances. And of course, with when people don't have say in their own borders and they don't have say of their first originally created governments, there's going to be massive disputes, and we're not letting things happen naturally. We're not letting things occur. We are trying to control everything. We being the United States, not me. Obviously, I'm for peace. I'm for ending sanctions. I'm for more open borders, but that's just me.
They put together a motion of no confidence, which the Speaker just kicked out of Parliament this very day, because it was the fruits of a foreign conspiracy and because Imran Khan had already asked the president of the country to dissolve the National Assembly and hold general elections within 90 days. General elections which I confidently predict will see Imran Khan sweep the country if the United States does not ensure that the army, whose top brass are playthings of the United States and always have been, ever since the country was created, the military which hanged the martyr Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the military which overthrew elected prime ministers like Nawaz Sharif, like Benazir Bhutto. If the military rigs the election, then there will be serious trouble in Pakistan, a mighty country, in a strategically vital place in the world, and of course, in possession of a fleet of nuclear weapons. It doesn't get much more dangerous than that. Even worse, they may kill Imran Khan, their cricketing hero, their prime minister who has stood tall and been visible throughout the world as a champion of justice in Pakistan, in Asia, and in the world. And it's the fear of assassination which has led the government in Pakistan to step up the Prime Minister's personal security because they became aware of a plot to murder him. So if you are a religious person, then pray for the safety of Imran Khan. Not just because he's a fine and noble political figure, but because the murder of Imran Khan would be an extremely catastrophic event in the history of South Asia and in the history of the world, and would set in motion events potentially cataclysmic in their importance.
Yeah, Pakistan and India both have nuclear weapons, and them being at each other's throats over borders and over food or whatever is really, really fucking scary. Really scary.
We'll be taking
Horrifying.
calls. Of course, they're sleeping in Pakistan now, but we'll be taking calls on this subject. There are millions of overseas Pakistanis around the world. The government has acted swiftly before leaving office this evening. They have dismissed the discredited governor of the Punjab, one Mohammed Sarwar, a former parliamentary colleague of mine. I've known him as a loyal supporter of every single party in Pakistan. He's a man that has betrayed everyone that ever helped him, everyone that ever worked with him.
Wow, that's fucked up. He's like, I worked with him, and he has betrayed everyone. No, I don't know. That's fucking wild. That's the most intense thing I've heard him say. I mean, he worked with him, so he can say it, right? Like, he's probably worked with him personally a little bit. Jeez, that's wild.
Him, including me. If I were to tell you the even bare bones of his serial betrayals, well, we wouldn't have anything else on the show. But one day maybe I'll make a special podcast about the now dismissed and disgraced governor of the Punjab, ex-Mohammed Sarwar, ex-governor of the Punjab. Of course, the war drags on in the Ukraine, the American-Russian war, in which, as Peter Hitchens, that well-known Bolshevik, writing in that well-known communist newspaper, the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday, this very day, described as a US-Russian war, with the Ukraine being used merely as a battering ram. It is a bloody and wholly unnecessary war, one which could have been avoided and right up until the last moment. It emerged today in Germany that Prime Minister Scholz of Germany begged the Ukrainian leader Zelensky to, are we allowed to say Zelensky? We've got to drop the Z. Zelensky, whatever you want to call him. Scholz begged him, make a statement that you will definitely be neutral, you will definitely never join NATO. And having taken advice in Washington, no doubt, Zelensky refused to do so. If he had done so, this bloody war could have been avoided entirely.
That's just fucking...
As it is, it drags on. It will, of course, come to only one conclusion, as everyone involved in cheering from the sidelines or demanding more weapons and more action, like the 101st Chairborne Division in television studios and editorial offices all over the world are doing. Everyone knows this war can only end one way, and that is in the acceptance of the minimal terms that Russia set out at the beginning, together with new terms that have become inescapable, ineluctable, because a war had to be fought to secure them. But I believe and hope that this war will come to a negotiated end, and soon. But people are trying their best to prolong it. I predicted last week to ribaldry from some surprising quarters that the United States was planning a false flag event, either in the form of a chemical or biological weapon attack that never was, or might have been actually as a provocation launched by their own friends, perhaps in the Nazi Azov battalion, or some other kind of event. And it may very well be that the other kind of event is what we are now seeing. In the town of Bucha, in the Ukraine, we are seeing a well-coordinated, globally coordinated attempt to paint a picture of some ghastly, hideous war crime that has taken place there. I don't know for sure, of course, any more than you do, because this is a war in a country full of mobile phones and in a country packed full of journalists with surprisingly little war footage. But some footage has emerged that is intended to suggest that a war crime was committed by the Russian armed forces in the town of Bucha. I don't believe it because I haven't seen any evidence to make me believe it, but I have seen lots of evidence that suggests that it is indeed a false flag. Whether it's the corpses that wave their hand as the trucks go by, or the same corpse sitting up in the rear view mirror once the vehicle filming the situation had passed. I'm not making this up. You can find it easily on social media, on my Twitter feed. Or because I'd already seen that very street, that very footage, in which it was described as strewn with Russian soldiers' bodies, when they were trying to suggest that Ukraine had counterattacked and liberated Bucha, rather than the truth that the Russians had withdrawn from it and the Ukrainian armed forces had then occupied it. Or because the mayor of Bucha, when...
We can't believe anything the fucking mainstream media says anymore. It's literally gotten to that point where they're at a 0% believable rate. I personally am looking for independent media for everything I look for now. I mean, I don't even look at their propaganda anymore. I suggest you all do the same. I'm giving you guys dozens of sources. You don't even have to watch me by the end of watching me for a month because you know all the sources to go to, right? I mean, I'm learning new ones too, and I'm glad that people are showing them and sharing them with me. Thank you for anybody who shares these new people with me. I'm keeping as many as I can and checking them out, but I still have my trusted sources, so that's who we're getting fed to every day. And RT has just got throttled, so I've been trying to give the love to the XRT people as much as possible. With RT being throttled, man. So I'm going to show these guys, I'm going to direct you to their channels.
Russia withdrew on the 30th of March, tweeted pictures of himself in the town saying that the Russians had gone and that the city was now liberated. Except he didn't make any mention at all of any atrocity, any war crime that had taken place there. I know of lots of other war crimes, and again, if I were to adumbrate them, it would take the rest of the show. But I'm not at liberty to do that, though you may very well make calls and send messages to allow me to respond over the course of the show. So I don't believe that Bucha was a war crime. I believe it belongs in the long line of false flag operations used to trigger war from the Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam in the 1960s, now absolutely revealed to have been a false flag operation, to the attack on the American warship, the Vincennes, in the Mediterranean, to the false flag of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, to the false flag of the Gaddafi forces being given Viagra and sent out to rape people in eastern Libya. I've heard too many of these to believe them without evidence. But time will tell.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. That's the last segment of the night right there. I'm going to leave it here while I talk for a second. Again, I'm going to be going, I think I'm going to do this every once in a while because, first of all, 85% of my people who watch me don't subscribe. Second of all, most people watch 12 to 15 minutes, so I'll do it every once in a while tonight. If you are joining the stream late or whatever, I usually stream at midnight, and I will be streaming mostly on Twitch from here on out because YouTube has added a age blocker on me and is giving me a community warning or whatever. It's a secondary warning. It's just more warnings. They haven't given me a strike yet. They've given me all types of little warnings, and I happen to know that they're shadow banning me. So join me on Twitch. People like Status Coup and Graham Elwood, Ron Pacone, obviously Jackson. These people all live stream on Twitch, and you get way better notifications on Twitch. You actually get the notification right away, like you know when these people are going live compared to YouTube where they don't give you the notifications anymore. They don't do any notifications on YouTube anymore. So there's my bitch about YouTube. We'll see if they cut my stream now. I'm gonna complain about them as much as they keep cutting my fucking stream. So, oh yeah, my door's open. But dun, the second cut of the night. Like I said, so yeah, join me over Stony Progressive on Twitch, and I'm pretty sure you can watch it without needing a subscription. But to chat, you have to email verify and be subscribed, or not subscribed, follow. Subscribes pay, so follow. Just have to follow me and be email verified so they know that you're a real person. You can have an anonymous name, and like I said, you actually get notifications of people going live. That was the biggest thing for me, was noticing that like I actually get notifications of status coup, and I actually get notifications when people like Jackson Hinkle go live. I don't get those on YouTube. They don't tell me on YouTube. Even though I'm notified and subscribed and all that, they don't do anything. So on Twitch, I actually get those notifications. It's kind of cool. I actually can see people, um, you know, when they go live. And I prefer watching stuff live. So that's why I do this show, because I just like watching something live and interactive, and, having a chat to interact with. It's my preference. So that's why I do this, because I like interacting with people. On the live streams of other people, I do it late night, so you guys have somebody else if you're bored and want to chat too. Although Haas and Jackson are both live now, so we'll see if this includes. We'll just keep going. Eh? So yeah, this is Mathew Hoh. Ho. I would love to know how to say that properly. Um, I've been saying Ho, how, I don't. But anyway, Mathew Hoh took on the Pentagon. Now he's challenging the two-party duopoly. He is running for Green Party in North Carolina for Senate, going against Tom Tillis. Or is this the open seat? This is the open seat, right? That Bill Burr's currently leaving, and then Tom Tillis is running for re-election in 2024. I can't remember how it works. I don't live in North Carolina. I can look this up real quick if I guess blow up or something. You guys asked me to. Looks like there's only a few. But yeah, thanks for joining me. Like I said, they've added the adult supervision notification on my fucking YouTube or whatever. So I guess I swear enough that they did that, or they see that I smoke joints. I put it on the notification, like my own thing on my side. I put no kids and mature only. So I don't know why they had to send me a notification, but it's just their little way of giving me another warning.
The Green Party candidate for Senate in North Carolina.
Am I going to be blocking
and it's really great to interview you specifically at this time. I'm sure you have some thoughts as a U.S. veteran, disabled veteran, who actually resigned from your post in Afghanistan, on us now having a $800 billion military budget proposal. So we'll get into that. But tell us first about your story. I know you served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and events on the ground very much turned you against these wars and the military-industrial complex.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you for having me on, Jordan. And yeah, as you said,
again, North Carolina Senate, but also just Green Party candidate. If you want to support a third party candidate, he's looking to get signatures. He's looking to get, if you know anybody in North Carolina, send him his name. Say, hey, sign something for third party. They don't have to actually be a Green Party follower. Just know that following somebody in the Green Party is supporting third party, is trying to break up the duopoly. So you can support a candidate like this that it has an actual chance to take a chip out of a Senate seat. It helps third parties. We got to support them.
I'm running for the U.S. Senate here in North Carolina as a Green Party candidate. But I was in the Marine Corps for 10 years. Went to the Iraq War twice. By the time I got to Afghanistan in 2009, I had been appointed into the Foreign Service. And at that point, I was morally and intellectually broken. And after getting to Afghanistan, seeing that the war in Afghanistan was no fundamentally different than the war in Iraq, seeing that the Obama administration was no fundamentally different than the Bush administration, seeing that the escalation of the war that was occurring in 2009 was going to be catastrophic for the Afghan people, as well as for just adding, just escalating the war. It wasn't just the idea of adding more U.S. troops. You were escalating the entire war, and that was just going to continue for years. And as we saw what happened over the last 12 years in Afghanistan since my resignation. So at that point, again, morally and intellectually broken, I resigned in protest over the escalation of the war in 2009, and ended up having a lot of cars, kind of Forrest Gump myself into a media celebrity situation. And that led into becoming involved with both the anti-war community, but also to going into the think tank community as well, doing, so having that activist experience, both wearing a suit and tie and heading into Congress in DC to talk about the wars, talk about militarism, but also too working with groups like Veterans for Peace or Code Pink, with my body.
Two of the best organizations you could be a part of. I think Veterans for Peace is the one that Mike Preisner is also a part of, who is Abby Martin's husband. And then, yeah, Code Pink is fucking fantastic, of course.
Actually on the line on the street level. And with them, I was able to do work all throughout the country as well as internationally. So I feel like I come to this with a pretty good perspective of both, street level and, the suit and tie DC level that gives me some awareness of what I'm stepping into, as well as the urgency of why I'm in it.
Right. And, Republicans say they love the troops. Democrats say they love the troops. I'm sure as a Green Party candidate, you've got just an onslaught of positive media coverage or media coverage in general, and are getting a fair shake in this Senate race, correct?
Oh, Jordan's trying to be funny. I like it. I love that he's platforming Mathew. That shows an independent journalist right there. Somebody that's interested to talk to a veteran who has good political policies, good political views. If you're willing to talk to this person, that shows integrity. So all the mainstream media can kiss it right now because they're all ignoring this person. There's a pretty simple look at it from my perspective. All right, like if you're gonna platform somebody that's third party independent but has all the right platforms, all the right media presence, then that's a journalist. If you're not,
I think we're actually doing a little bit better than a tip, because I have had a lot of media experience. So
Great.
I have been on local television here in North Carolina because I've previously been on local television here in North Carolina. Still getting shut out of stuff. Still getting shut out.
I found like one clip from Mathew on MSNBC or CNN about anti-war back in, again, like when he said he got a little famous in 2009, 2010. Since he started running for stuff, media blackout completely. But back when he was not trying to run for stuff and just being an anti-war vet, he got a tiny, tiny touch of mainstream media, just a fraction. And that's how they treat independent candidates. So that's how they treat anybody who doesn't. I mean, you can be a perfect person. Like they should look at his policies and be like, man, that is a progressive Democrat. Except for that he doesn't actually want to do the barking orders of the Democratic Party, which progressive Democrats always get infiltrated into the fucking deep state Nancy Pelosi crap. And so he doesn't want to go through that, but it's hard to break that narrative, so I'm going to scream it from the rooftops. Third parties are better. Independent parties are better.
I have some lefty podcasts that I've been on as well. Some of the bigger podcast YouTube folks on the left, I've been on their programs in the past, haven't been on. Now, I mean, there could be a lot of reasons for that. So I don't want to just jump into, hey, they're keeping us out kind of thing. But there certainly is a reaction to running as third party, as a green or as independent, and not taking part in the two-party system. I received a lot of pushback from people that I had worked with in Washington, D.C. for quite a while. People are part of both 501c3s and 501c4s. 501c3s, of course, nonprofit organizations supposed to be nonpartisan. But anyone who's worked in DC knows that most of the nonprofits in DC tend to fall into one camp or the other. And there's a very real
Yup.
fear among these people.
In doing research for this for the last couple months, just my last 2 months streaming, if you want to look at any of my old streams, you will see me laughing every time I see somebody now, because when I look up a Congress pack, I look at packs, I look at those packs, and it's just like, oh, yep, super left, super right, super left, super right, and you just see the same names over and over again, and they're all, it's like, oh, or this, this society, or this. You can put whatever word afterwards you want to, because there's 15 names the way to say that these are just billionaires giving money to the super left or super right.
And
When I say super left or super right, I mean like hardcore Democrat or hardcore Republican, not actual leftists or rightists. I mean hardcore Democrat, hardcore Republican, like the partisan bullshit bickering that they do.
some of them were quite hostile to me
Not
when
actual
I
policy
announced my
different.
campaign in January.
RD
That
different.
I would be upsetting things personally for them because of connections, right? So that because you know this guy, now you may not be invited to that DSCC fundraiser or to the DCCC, family cookout or whatever, right? You know what I mean? So there, because that kind of retaliation, as you know, is real. And I also know too on the media side that someone like myself or independent or green or a libertarian or whoever goes on to the local television station, let alone one of the major national networks, the they get inundated with the local county Democrats call, the state Democrats call, the national calls. I mean, like you have that type of pressure that gets put on them. And I actually experienced that firsthand. Jared, I know this from experience because when I was doing media after I resigned from Afghanistan, United States Central Command under General Petraeus at that time, based.
I think he just called him Jared, didn't he? That's not that. He's seeing tons of independent people. Most of these people he's probably never actually watched their show or anything. So I'm not gonna. It's just you should write it down.
Down in Florida, they actually hired a strategic communications firm to discredit me because I was on the Today Show. I had with Judy Woodruff. I mean, all kinds of stuff, being interviewed continuously. And what they did was they hired a firm, and this firm played, hardball as you would expect. And so, like the example, one time I did an interview with Dan Rather, and I'm walking out of the interview, and his producer comes up and say, "Hey, how do you respond to this?" And he shows me a letter that came from the strategic communications firm working on behalf of General Petraeus and his folks that said basically, look, if Mathew Hoh is the type of person you want to work with, you're not the type of people we want to work with. Basically saying, if you want access to the generals, if you want to talk to General Petraeus, General McChrystal, if you want a helicopter ride in Afghanistan at some point, then don't have this guy on your program. And a month later, when that program with Dan Rather aired, I was nowhere to be seen. But Dan Rather's person was flying around in a helicopter with Stanley McChrystal. So, I mean,
they never aired your interview.
No, they never did. And they brought me up from DC, up to New York, met up with them, the whole crew in a hotel, right? About 2.5 hours of interview. We're walking outside in Midtown Manhattan, Rather and I, getting B-roll. And Rather says to me, he says, "I know you're right about Afghanistan because I've been going there for 30 years and I know you're right." Right. And then this message comes from Central Command and nowhere to be seen. And first, I can tell you, Jared, we could be here. I'm sorry. I keep calling Jared. Jordan, I'm sorry about that. I apologize.
There you go.
Jared's my brother. It's fine.
We can be here all day. I could just tell you stories like that, as well as stories about working.
Good on him for catching it, though. That's solid. He doesn't have a mic in his ear. He doesn't have somebody he remembered. So good on him. That was solid. Solid on him for remembering, not having somebody having to. He doesn't have microphones in his ear. He doesn't have that kind of equipment in a house interview like this. So that was solid on him.
With members of Congress who, folks on the Armed Services Committee, Senate Armed Services Committee, House Armed Services Committee, who, very clearly did not want to stick their neck outs on behalf of the troops that they claim to support and love so much, let alone on behalf of what's best for the American people or stopping an atrocity like, the Iraq War, the Yemen War, the Syrian War, the Afghan War, what's happening in sub-Saharan Africa, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So basically, we support the troops if they're muzzled, and just wave the flag.
As long as it's politically best for us.
Right.
And I can tell you a story. I think it gets the point clear. Is in November 2009, the late John Murtha, former Democrat from Pennsylvania, brings me into the basement of the Capitol building, in one of the big conference rooms in the basement, and Murtha has me speak to the entire House Democratic caucus. There must have been probably 200 of them sitting there on folding chairs. They'd all made themselves sandwiches. Very odd thing to experience for someone kind of coming into that environment like I was. And, I make my piece about the Afghan war, the Afghan escalation. Murtha says the same thing. It's just like Vietnam. It's just like Iraq. The Democratic caucus gets upset, and they have microphones, and there must have been 6 or 7 or 8 members stacked behind each of the microphones wanting to say the same thing. We can't let Obama do what Bush did. We can't let Obama do what Johnson did. That kind of thing. Goes on for, 15, 20 minutes. Speaker Pelosi pops up out of the middle of the crowd. And Speaker Pelosi says, and what had happened the week before, an important part of the Affordable Care Act of Obamacare, the ACA, had been passed. I can't remember what it was, but the House had passed a very integral part of the thing. And Speaker Pelosi said, look, remember, the ACA is President Obama's domestic priority. That means it's our priority. We cannot go against him on the war at this point. We can't put him in a corner. We have to do everything we can to ensure his priorities are filled. And with that, they all sat back down. And there was never really any effort by the U.S. Congress. There were some voice votes passed and some other things over the years to get out of Afghanistan, but certainly nothing ever happened again because it wasn't in the interest of the White House for it to occur. And so it didn't occur. And so that's the reality of it. You see that all the time. And again, for a story like that, I can tell you 6, 7, 8 different stories. Ike Skelton, Jack Reed, Adam Smith, stories involving all those types of people, more or less saying one thing and then doing another.
So let me ask you about, if you win, which we'll get to your chances. I know you're for universal health care, strong on getting money out of politics.
There's 2 winners. That's some of the 2 most important things out of there. I think money out of politics should be up there as number 1 or 2 for everybody. And yeah.
No compromise Green New Deal, which I wanted to ask you about. So tell me, because, frankly, a lot of people don't know.
Green New Deal was originally from the Green Party, from Jill Stein, and AOC diluted the shit out of it, and the Democrats co-opted it to take it away from the Green Party because, they wanted to make it more corporate friendly.
Green New Deal did not start with AOC. It started with the Green Party. So can you kind of talk to me about, some of your top policy priorities if you were to get in there?
Well, I really, if you look at my campaign website, which is Mathew Hoh for Senate.org, and the first thing on my platform page is, democratic reform, democratic strengthening, democratic expansion. I think as you mentioning the money in politics, as well as several other things we have to do, whether it be abolishing the filibuster and abolishing the electoral college or moving towards ranked choice voting and proportional representation.
That's huge too. Giving people the opportunity to vote their heart and get rid of that stigma of, you have to vote for the RD or else you're screwing and blah, blah, blah. Like that whole stigma has completely ruined most of the electorate. And people are scared to vote. Like people like, what? And then other people are, they don't feel like their vote matters. So there's problems with so much of that, and giving people ranked choice voting, saying go in there and vote for your conscience, go out there and vote, for you can vote for a backup, and And also, we should have a national holiday for voting, or we should have 4 days to vote. Always, it should be you can start voting on Saturday, you can vote on Sunday, you can vote on Monday, or you can vote on Tuesday, election day. Every election should be like rather a holiday or a 4-day vote. Maybe a presidential election should be a holiday and the midterms a 4-day vote, but we should give people the opportunity to vote. If you only have one day to vote and you're somebody that fucking works your ass off, you don't get that opportunity to vote really. You get it taken away from you. And that's why we had 20 to 30 more million, like, well, we had 30 million more votes this last election than we did in 2016 because people had the time to vote. You give people time to vote and they will vote. And if you give them more opportunity and give them more of a choice, then they will feel more inclined to participate in the process.
You know, you know, a host of other things we have to accomplish, because with the current political structure, the current political system, the way it's so captured by money, all these other things that we need that are existential for us, whether it's a threat of nuclear war, whether it's climate crisis, whether it's an economic bill of rights for people, without fundamentally redoing, I mean, if you want to call it breaking the political system, nonviolently, but breaking the political system and rebuilding it, reimagining it, rebuilding it, so that it serves the will of the people, it meets the needs of the people, and respects human rights. I don't think we have a chance unless we do that with the current system. Again, break it, rebuild it, reimagine it, have it structured so it supports people. So that's the first priority. Climate crisis is a close to, and these priorities, of course, are, you know, I guess however you want to, wherever you're coming from is going to be your perspective on it, right? What would be number one, number two? I mean, the unfortunate reality, man, is that we got to do all of this.
Right.
The reality is we have to do all of it. We don't have the luxury to say, well, you know, universal health care, yeah, but we're not going to do debt cancellation. We're not going to do something about wages. We're not going to do something about housing. You know, I mean, unless we do it all together, and it all ties together, I believe, as well. With the climate crisis, which
Yeah, you have sweeping platforms. You have policy changes that affects both jobs and climate and affordable housing, and you have these massive platforms. It's exactly right. I don't know why we have, huge bills, but the bills are all over the place. They're not connected to each other, and they're just ways for the highlighted name to be something good, and then that way they can screw us on 5 freaking, attachments. And it's a broken system. The whole thing is broken. I think more and more of us are screaming that. And more of us are learning it. And the more we scream and the more we learn, the more other people will open up their eyes to. And that's what we're trying to do.
is existential. It's incredibly urgent. We are seeing the results of inaction for the last several decades. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Dan Quayle talking about climate change, global warming, in the vice presidential debates. I mean, I can remember that, I mean, so this has been around for quite a while, and we've chosen to do nothing. And, I'm Generation X, but the children in my family, the kids in my neighborhood here, they will be cursing and damning this generation before we die because of our inaction. So the climate crisis is that existential, and in order to deal with it, you need massive government effort. And so when we talk about like a no compromise Green New Deal, as you mentioned, this goes back to
it's massive. It's massive. Like all things connected.
what the Green Party starts speaking about at least a dozen years ago, and this idea of investing trillions of dollars to rebuild the entire U.S. economy, restructure our infrastructure, whether that be physical or social, because as people, I think, understand with the coming climate crisis. Look, I was just in Elizabeth City, which is a port town here in North Carolina, and talking to a journalist there a week or so ago. And he told me what their plan is for climate change, as they understand what's going to happen. And they're 12 feet above sea level, so they've got a little bit of cushion, but they still see what's coming. that they're going to have to pick up and move their entire downtown. You know, how do you do that? The instability that climate crisis would cause, and I'm not talking about the wildfires, the droughts, the floods, and the famine, and the hundreds of millions of migrants, and everything else that's going to occur. But there's also this other piece of the fundamental disruption of our economic and social structures. How are you going to pick up and move the downtowns of how many different cities and towns in the United States? I mean, the disruption that will occur to local economies and to families. And if you do not have some type of societal structure to support those people, and in particular, going back now to the Economic Bill of Rights, which is so fundamental, I believe, to a Green New Deal, no compromise Green New Deal. And when we say no compromise Green New Deal, we are talking about, not this corporate greenwashing that you hear from the Democrats, where, well, what's going to happen is that the same corporations that got us into this mess are going to be the ones who are going to build these carbon capture machines, which is complete science fiction. But they're going to build these carbon capture machines, and they're very similar to the Adam McKay, David Sirota film, Don't Look Up. The comet is going to provide jobs, right? So this idea that climate change, climate crisis is going to provide jobs, and that, they're lining up at the trough for that. And, but the idea of tying into that Green New Deal, this Economic Bill of Rights that is so necessary to support, it's necessary now. I mean, people are living with these existential, and I don't use that word lightly. I know you already used it 2 or 3 times, right? But they're living with these their own personal crises that are a result of, their health care is decided by how much money they have in their checking account at the end of the month. People in my neighborhood, I can point to a house right there where the people had to move because the rent went up. And now she and her kids live farther away. They already lived far away from work. Now they live even farther away from work. Things are more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. It just keeps adding up. And the weight on people. In North Carolina, we just were told last week that 40% increase in overdose deaths. So the destruction that is coming upon our communities now. But then when you look at, oh my God, the climate crisis, what will it do? If we don't prepare ourselves structurally for that, I don't know what it will actually look like, and it will just like, I think, the climate crisis. You have this idea of with climate, right? You put positive feedback, right? So the warmer it gets, the wetter it gets. The wetter it gets, the warmer it gets. On and on and on. Well, I think that same type of rapid devolution, that a cycle of reinforcement will continue societally, right? As costs go up, despair goes up, on and on and on.
And finally, I mean, let's keep it real. It's a Herculean task for Green Party candidates, even locally. There's been some success, but not so much nationally. Tell me about the obstacles running as a Green Party candidate, and what do you think your realistic?
Gee, there's no obstacles. Yeah, everybody's super fair to the Green Party. No one ever, forgets about third parties. No one ever talks bad about third parties. So there's no problems.
Chances are of competing in the Senate race?
Well, we have to get on the ballot, which is the first hurdle. And I've come to learn a lot about ballot access. And ballot access just may be one of the most important, if not the most important thing keeping the two-party system in position, in power. If you keep people off the ballot, which of course is a form of voter suppression, you maintain your two-party system. Right. I mean, very similar to like I just was at a candidate forum last night, listening to some local candidates, and a lot of talk about workers and unions, and this, the understanding that, look, a worker's power is in their ability to strike, their leverage. Is in their ability to strike. That's much like voters are. Their power is in casting their votes or not casting their votes. So if you limit them, and if you then force them to participate in the lesser of two evil system, then you're going to keep that system. So this ballot access is incredibly important to maintain that two-party privileged position. And so what you see with the ballot access, it's so surprising to me as I'm experiencing it and doing and being part of this right now, is how costly it is. I mean, the idea that you have to collect tens of thousands of signatures to get on the ballot, it's incredibly costly, let alone filing costs and everything else. But the idea that you have to have, for our case, we have to collect roughly about 18 or 19,000 total signatures, raw signatures, that then go through a verification process. And so that's how you get to your number. And when you look at that, when you understand that a volunteer on a good day will get you between 10 and 15 signatures an hour on a good day, you do the math, right? You divide 19,000 by 10. Okay. And you start to realize how many person hours, how many men and women you need to accomplish this. And then you look at the time frame that you have. And you start to understand, as I now understand, whenever I talk to anyone now about this, they all say, oh, of course you pay for petitioners. Of course you pay to get your signatures. That's how everyone does it. Right? And what you've seen actually, which is new to me, is this petitioning industry that is a subset of the two-party system, because what you have, particularly say in states like California, where they have a lot of say ballot referendums, you have an industry that exists because there are tens of millions of dollars available to pay petitioning firms and petitioners. You hear stories of people making $1,000 a day collecting signatures, right? Because the Democrats or Republicans or some other special interest group will put 10, 15, $20 million into a ballot referendum campaign, no problem. So right. The problem is that creates that market, right? So when we then say, okay, we have volunteers, but we don't have the organization to have the hundreds of volunteers that we need committed weekly for 3 or 4 hours a piece every week, because in order to do that, you have to be an organization that already has a lot of money behind it. So when you turn to the paid petitioning firms, what you see is that, okay, well, at a minimum, it's going to cost you $5 a signature, $6 a signature, $7 a signature. And now you're saying, well, I need to get 5,000 signatures. I need at least $25,000, right? I mean, I know I went into a lot of detail there, probably more than people were expecting or hoping, but hopefully it kind of gives an idea just on that one aspect of ballot access, why it's so hard for third parties, independents, Greens, whoever, to get on the ballot. It's difficult, and that's purposeful. They do it, in order, again, to maintain the system that they have. So it's a hurdle. We've got a great group of people. We've got, we're raising money. If people can support us, of course, please do so. Again, MathewHoh4Senate.org. And then the idea, we get on the ballot, and the next thing is getting into the debates. Another aspect of ballot access, right, is every state's different. Here in North Carolina, it's as crooked as anywhere else, the way the debates work. They don't want the third parties or independents in. Again, another form of ballot access. And so that will be the next thing that we take on after getting on the ballot, is getting on the debate, so that come time for the debates in September, there is someone standing up there arguing against that $813 billion Pentagon budget, arguing for universal health care, arguing for annually adjusted livable wage, arguing for rent control. I mean, you say rent control down here, man, and people just, they crap their pants. It's like, but rent control, I don't know any other way you're going to accomplish getting these housing costs under control in a way that's fair and just for working families. I mean, here in North Carolina, rents have gone up 20% in the last year. Houses have gone up 25% in the last year. And that's on top of inflation from before that. So, I mean, if you want somebody like that in the debates, then we got to get on the ballot. Or do that, we need the money, so on and so on and so on. So, yeah.
Thank you for taking the time. I'll definitely keep in touch with you.
Yeah, please.
I'd love to hear about any shenanigans you're dealing with, so we could
We'll
report
keep
that. But good luck to you down in North Carolina, and thank you for your service as well.
Hey, well, thank you. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate what you do, highlighting people like me. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. And that's MathewHoh4Senate.org.
MathewHoh4Senate.org. Yes. Thank you.
What planet are you on, Jen?
I think I already answered your question, Emerald. Do you have another one?
Sure. I have one more question for you. You said woman a few minutes ago, so which is it today, Jen? Are we referencing a difference in gender? Can you at least acknowledge what a woman is, or does that not suit your narrative today?
Listen, Emerald, if you are against the Don't Say Gay bill, the fact that men can have the same rights as women and take paternity leaves, I think it's clear that you are a racist and a homophobe and just can't quite comprehend what this administration is doing.
That I would agree with you there. That's an understatement, Jen. I'm not a racist nor a homophobe, but like I said in the beginning of the interview, the American people are not dumb and not buying into the circus show. But if you do choose to come back on my show in the near future, perhaps you can be a little more prepared, because the infamous Psaki Dodge is not going to fly here. Are we clear on that?
Well, like I said, I think we're done here. Need to get going. I'm going to finish watching Inventing Anna on Netflix, and I wish you the best, Emerald. I really do.
And likewise, happy April Fool's Day. Other political figures. Rachel, I'm so excited to have you. Somebody flagged your comedy skits for me because you had included an exchange between me and Psaki, a real exchange, and I just cracked up. I thought it was just genius.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here, Emerald. I'm a big fan of yours. So the feelings are mutual, and the Jen Psaki skit with you especially are amongst my favorites.
How did you start doing this? What gave you the idea?
So I've always had a comical side to me. It was actually during the lockdown that I got on TikTok and started doing the infamous trends and lip syncing. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time and a lifestyle blogger, home with a 2-year-old at the time. And when he would take his nap, I would go on TikTok, and eventually the lip syncing went into doing Nancy Pelosi. And the outpouring of support and can't get enough of it just was flooding in with comments and so forth. And then I started doing AOC, and I try to do both sides as much as possible, but it was mainly, I call it a lot of the lunacy on the left that I just, feel it's a little more comical to showcase, and people couldn't get enough of it. I've been doing this now for 2 years, and I'm on a couple platforms doing it. And I don't just do the lip syncs, I also do full blown impersonations and skits and so forth. It's been a whirlwind, and I
Welcome to On Contact. Today we discuss the importance of third parties in the upcoming presidential election with Howie Hawkins.
I'm worried about climate change. Nukes are on hair trigger alert. We're getting into a new nuclear arms race. Obama approved a $1 trillion modernization. Now we've pulled out of the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty. You know, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists have their, doomsday clock at 2 minutes to midnight. That's as high as it's ever been. So I worry that too many progressive-minded people are going to settle for someone who's status quo, Democrat.
Perhaps there is no better illustration of the importance of third parties than the Green New Deal. It was not the progressive wing of the Democratic Party led by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who first proposed this project. It was articulated 12 years ago by the Green Party, which called for a massive jobs and public works program to transition our energy infrastructure to renewable energy. The deal was promoted by Howie Hawkins when he ran for the governorship of New York in 2014 and by Jill Stein during her 2016 presidential run. The proposal for a Green New Deal by the Green Party, however, has a fundamental difference from that being touted by progressive Democrats. It does not argue that structural change and a transition to renewable energy will come by making alliances with corporate power. Unless we bring about a transformational change in our economy by overthrowing corporate power and establishing a socialist system, all efforts to create a Green New Deal, as well as roll back the abuses of corporate power, will be stillborn. Joining me to discuss the Green New Deal and the importance of the Green Party in the upcoming presidential race is Howie Hawkins, who has formed an exploratory committee to see if he should run as the Green Party's presidential candidate. And I hope you do. So let's talk, because there's going to be a lot of pressure in 2020, even more pressure than the past, that we just have to get rid of Trump. Everything has become personalized in Donald Trump, and once he disappears, we'll magically restore our democracy, except, of course, we won't. So talk about that. What do you say to people who say, I can't vote third party?
Because the Democrats don't have real solutions. Trump is a racist scapegoater. He's a freeloading leech, doesn't pay his own employees, contracts, taxes, and he lies to the people. I mean, he needs to go. But you replace him with Democrats, they're not going to enact Medicare for all. They're not going to do a Green New Deal. They are backing Trump, who now wants a war for oil in Venezuela while the planet is burning for burning oil. I mean, it's madness. So the point of having a Green Party, and we're fighting for our existence. I mean, getting on the ballot in this country compared to other electoral democracies around the world is a real battle. And so that's one purpose of the campaign, just to exist and be able to present these things. The historic role of third parties in this country has been to raise issues the major parties won't take up. like the Liberty Party and the question of slavery. They were the abolitionists when the Whigs and the Democrats didn't want to touch the issue. And we can go for 150 years of history and show how that's the case.
Well, that Roosevelt's New Deal came out of the Progressive Party, and he didn't think it up. But he, as the kind of the liberal wing of the oligarchic elite, realized with the breakdown of capitalism that in the same way you see the Democrats appropriating the Green New Deal, except asking corporations to do it. This is a classic example of the importance of third parties throughout our history. And yet, there's probably never been a harder time in American history in which to mount third parties because of the collusion of the Democratic and Republican elites who, since Ross Perot, as you point out, and I work for Nader, make it almost impossible even to get on the ballot, much less get to the debates.
Or get covered by the mass media, which is how you get the word out. Yeah, that's become a bigger problem. You used to be able to get print media, go town to town, but the newspapers are dying. So that's very difficult. You can go on social media, but that's a swamp. I mean, you get drowned out. I remember in the 60s, Paul Goodman complaining about how you could put out a nice op-ed, but you get drowned out with all the, garbage in the media. So that's always been a tough problem. But now they formed a commission here in New York State. It takes 50,000 running for governor to get a ballot line. I did that 3 times running for the Green Party.
And you got, what, 5%, was it?
I got as high as 5%.
Yeah.
That was in 2014. And, Governor Cuomo responded by going with a ban on fracking, movement toward $15 minimum wage and tuition-free college and paid family leave, which were top issues in our campaign. So he had to respond. That 5% leveraged some issues. On the other hand, go back to the New Deal. Franklin Roosevelt once told Norman Thomas, the socialist standard bearer in that time, what do you think? I carried out your program. And Thomas replied, yeah, on a stretcher.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with what we're getting with the Green New Deal when it gets in the Democratic hands. Or Bernie Sanders calls himself a socialist when he's really a New Deal liberal. He explicitly says we don't want social ownership of the major means of production, which is how you have economic democracy. And just take the energy question. We are not going to get to 100% clean energy if Exxon gets to reinvest its earnings in more oil exploration, extraction, and sales. And the Koch brothers and all their interests in the oil industries. Those should be publicly owned, and then we take the earnings, because we'll use fossil fuels in the transition, but reinvest them in renewables. So that is a socialist solution. You can get programs of social provision, like Social Security is one of the New Deal programs, like Medicare for All, which Bernie Sanders champions. But as long as the capitalist oligarchy has their power based on their concentrated ownership of the economy, that translates into political power, they can roll it back. They can take Dennis Kucinich, the boy mayor of Cleveland. He was elected on a promise not to privatize the municipal utility, which the suburban utility wanted to do. And he kept his promise. So the bank said, okay, we're not going to roll over your line of credit. Now, every city needs a line of credit because the taxes come in bunches, and you got to make payroll every week. So they bankrupted the city and forced Kucinich out. That's the kind of private power that if you don't deal with, your reform program is not going to hold.
What's interesting about Sanders, and has been my long criticism of Sanders, is that he won't attack the military-industrial complex. And you can't build a socialist country when over half of your discretionary spending is being funneled into useless wars and the military. And I just want to, before we go into this, you're a Marine Corps veteran and come out of the working class here. Although somehow you went to Dartmouth, I don't know how that happened, but
Sports.
Was it sports?
Sports, yeah.
A dirty secret. I also went to college for sports. I thought they were accepting me as a dangerous intellectual. But anyway, go ahead. Talk about that because any serious reconfiguration of power has to confront the unchecked and rampant militarism, which Bernie won't touch.
Yeah, and waste, fraud, and abuse, $23 trillion unaccounted for in this recent audit that actually Sanders helped get. Now, I don't think all that money was stolen. It's a lot of incompetence. And that is an enormous drain, not just on the operating budget of the government, but we have put all of our human capital, engineers and scientists, into developing weapons of mass destruction instead of clean energy technology. Now, we got the technology for that, but our manufacturing base in this country, it didn't go away just because of cheap labor markets abroad, which we encourage, and the maquiladoras of Mexico or in China. Japan and Germany have high-wage competitive manufacturing because they've kept their technology up. We have not done that. So when I talk about a Green New Deal, I'm talking about an economic Bill of Rights, like Roosevelt called for at the end of his 1944 State of the Union address, asked Congress to enact. A job, income, healthcare, housing, and education, primary rights. And then the Civil Rights Movement picked that up with the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, the Freedom Budget, and the Poor People's Campaign. And we still don't have it. So that's part of it, but the other part is 100% clean energy by 2030. But to do that, we've got to reorganize all the sectors: agriculture, manufacturing, the military, transportation, for sustainability, or we'll never get to 100%
Well,
clean
and let's
energy.
be clear that if we don't, and we don't do it quickly, the human species is going to suffer a massive die-off, if not go extinct. That's the existential crisis that we face.
Right. We face it from global warming. We face it from the overuse, well, the maximum use of pesticides, which is killing off the insects. And that's an important part of the food pyramid. And if you don't have insects, you don't have agriculture.
Well,
you don't have
I just
agriculture.
had Vandana Shiva on here, who addresses that issue, and if people haven't watched it, they should. One of the things that, having been close to Ralph and worked with third parties since Ralph ran in 2000, is that the positions that are taken by the Green Party are, in fact, in almost all cases, majoritarian positions. I just want to read a few off.
Sure.
The economy. 82% of Americans think wealthy people have too much power and influence. 69% think large businesses have too much power and influence in Washington. 78% of likely voters support stronger rules and enforcement regulation of the financial industry. 48% of Americans think economic inequality is very big or moderately big, 34%. 59% of registered voters and 51% of registered Republicans favor raising the minimum amount that low-wage workers can make and still be eligible for the earned income tax credit from $14,820 to $18,000. 96% of Americans, including 96% of Republicans, believe money in politics is to blame for the dysfunction of the American system. 76% believe wealthy Americans should pay higher taxes. 59% favor raising the federal minimum wage to at least $12 an hour. 61%, including 42% of Republicans, this surprised me, approve of labor unions. 60% of Americans believe it is the federal government's responsibility to make sure all Americans have health care. And 60% of registered voters favor expanding Medicare to provide health insurance to every single citizen. 59% favor free early childhood education. 76% are concerned about climate disruption. 84% support requiring background checks for all gun owners. 58% of Americans believe that abortion should be legal and all. And yet, from both of the parties, none, almost none, except for maybe abortion, none of these majoritarian issues are being addressed.
And that's the problem of American politics. Public preferences don't translate into public policy because the political system responds to the donors, not the voters. And that's why it's important that the Greens be out there. And the first thing we got to do is get on the ballot. I mean, we have 51 state ballots counting D.C., and we're on about 20 now, but that leaves the other 31. And we've, done a rough estimate. We need about 800,000 signatures and $1.5 million just to have some coordinators for the volunteers out there to get all those signatures. Big job. And we're just fighting to get into the election. Then you fight to get in, then you fight to get heard. But in most countries, you just have a reasonable requirement to just show you're not frivolous, and then you're in.
Well, but
and that's the way it
in
ought
the
to
American
be.
system, if you don't have literally hundreds of millions of dollars, you can't advertise because these television stations, CNN, this is where they're making all their money from, and because the debate commission is a private corporation, which a lot of people don't know, you're locked out.
Yeah. And the media won't take it seriously unless you got those hundreds of millions of dollars.
If you watch in the media when they report, even now, it's Bernie Sanders has raised this amount. All of your credibility, implicitly, by the media is how much money you've got.
Yeah, but Bernie Sanders' example is what the left, the Greens, have to do. Lots of people giving a little bit. We can do that. That's historically what the labor movement, the socialist movement has done. And parties started from the top down. There were elite caucuses. The working class couldn't vote.
We're going to come back to that.
Okay.
When we come back, we will continue our conversation about third party.
Speaking of the walls. Closing in and press freedom. I wanted to ask you about WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. This month, Britain's highest court rejected an appeal from Julian, who's seeking to block his extradition to the United States. The ruling means the British Home Secretary will have the final decision on whether to turn Assange over to the Biden administration. He faces espionage charges that could bring up to 175 years in prison after he published classified U.S. documents on WikiLeaks that exposed war crimes, the Afghan war logs, the Iraq war logs, State Department documents going back decades. Now, Julian Assange's lawyers argue he could face prolonged solitary confinement in a U.S. supermax prison, conditions that are tantamount to torture. Chris Hedges, you were in London last week as a guest of the imprisoned WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange, and Stella Morris for their wedding, which they fought for in the maximum security Belmarsh prison. And I just want to play what you said outside the prison.
A society that prohibits the capacity to speak in truth extinguishes the capacity to live in justice. And this is why we are here today. Yes, all of us who know and admire Julian decry his prolonged suffering and the suffering of his family.
So that's the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Chris Hedges speaking last week in London outside the Belmarsh prison. In January, we spoke to Stella Morris on Democracy Now! She was at that time the fiancée of Julian Assange.
Physical health and his mental health are obviously deteriorating because he's only a man. He's a fighter. He's a strong person, a strong-willed person who believes in the work that he's done, and he's aware that this is a fight that against a monumental injustice, but there's only so much a man can take.
Stella, since we've spoken, you had applied to be married, the two of you. The prison forbade that and then reversed their decision. And today, as you stood outside the new court ruling, you said, "Today we won, but Julian continues to suffer. Julian must be freed." Your final 10-second comment.
Well, Julian, for every win that we get, Julian's situation doesn't seem to change. And this is punishment through process. And it has to end. The Biden administration should just drop this. We shouldn't have to be taking it through the UK justice system, because this is a political prosecution that was initiated by the Trump administration, and it is causing ongoing harm.
So that's Stella Morris, now the wife of Julian Assange and the mother of their 2 children. Chris Hedges, if you can talk about what Julian Assange faces right now, does he have any final appeal, and why you believe he has been held for as long as he has before the Belmarsh prison, of course, taken refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, where we interviewed him a number of times in London. He had been granted political asylum.
Well, there's been a long, let me just throw out that because UC Global, the Spanish security firm in the embassy, filmed all of Julian's meetings with his attorneys, revoking or destroying the capacity for attorney-client privilege, the case shouldn't even be in court. This has been a kind of judicial farce. Julian did not commit a crime. In fact, the people who did commit the crimes, which he exposed, have never been charged. He ripped back the veil in a way that no other publisher has done in our lifetime on the inner workings of power. Whether it was the Podesta emails or Vault 7, which exposed the ability of the CIA to hack everything, our smartphones, our televisions, even our cars, or the Iraqi war logs, which you mentioned, and the ruling elites are determined to destroy him. So Stella mentioned his precarious condition. Well, it's quite dire. We know. I was in London covering the court trials, or they're not trials, actually, the hearings about the extradition, and was observed pacing his cell frantically, banging his head against the wall, hitting himself in the face, hallucinating, calling the Samaritan hotline because, in his words, he thought about committing suicide hundreds of times a day. He suffered a stroke. He's on antidepressants. They haul him off to the medical wing in isolation. He's crumbling physically and psychologically, and I think that's the point. He can go back now if, as expected, the Home Secretary rules in favor of the extradition. He can go back to the lower court, which blocked his extradition based on his potential for being a suicide risk and the harsh conditions in American prisons. He can challenge the other points. This is a legal dance that I suppose could last up to a year. Meanwhile, he is, of course, deteriorating, but everything looks as if it is engineered to ship him off to Gordon Kromberg in the Eastern District Court of Virginia, who's the kind of grand inquisitor. He persecuted my friend Samuel Arian for years and sent Daniel Hale, who exposed the widespread killing of civilians by the drone program, into prison for 45 months. Those of us who have followed the case closely have just watched this burlesque of it's kind of, it's more like the Lou Bianco or a show trial than it is the best of British jurisprudence, which I think is one of the reasons they make it so difficult to cover. And I just want to throw in, Amy, that there were 6 guests, including Craig Murray, who's probably done the best coverage of the trial, and at the last minute, the prison denied us entry. I suppose because, along with a photographer, I suppose because it's part of making Julian disappear. There are no photos, no images of Julian other than that one in the police van, and after that they put shutters on the windows so photographers couldn't take pictures of him. And that, I think they didn't want us in there because, of course, we would write about it. I wrote about it anyway, because it renders him human and I think exposes the kind of suffering, inexcusable suffering that has been visited on him and his family and, of course, his 2 children and his father. So it's absolutely appalling, and we criticize Vladimir Putin, as we should, for press censorship. But what about Julian? What about Julian Assange? So again, it's like that kind of hypocrisy that characterizes the American ruling class and unfortunately much of the American media itself.
So he has been held at Belmarsh for more than 1,000 days and, of course, in captivity in the Ecuadorian embassy, because if he stepped outside, he would be arrested for years before that. If you could end by talking about what he did expose, this trove of documents for which many leading newspapers in this country and around the world, from El País to the New York Times, won Pulitzer Prizes, The Guardian.
Well, he exposed the lies that were told repeatedly about the wars in the Middle East, the 700 civilians who approached too closely to checkpoints and were all gunned down and killed, the torture, the routine torture in places like Abu Ghraib, the, along with the kind of corruption. I mean, for instance, in Haiti, he exposed cables that where the U.S. Embassy was in collusion with the Haitian ruling class to thwart any rise in the minimum wage. I don't know what the minimum wage is in Haiti. It's probably under $1 an hour. I think it's 33 cents or something. I mean, this is just, and this, of course, sparked all sorts of, remember the Arab Spring and the pushback against the corrupt ruling class in Haiti. It all came because of WikiLeaks. He exposed the duplicity of Hillary Clinton, who was saying one thing to us on the campaign trail and accepting $675,000 to give 3 talks at Goldman Sachs, a sum so large it can only be considered a bribe. It exposed that she orchestrated the war in Libya to burnish her own credentials. So it was...
we have 5 seconds, Chris.
He provided the most important information, I would argue, along with Ed Snowden, of our generation, and they're making sure that he's crucified for it.
Will you be suing?
Provided the most important information, I would argue, along with Ed Snowden, of our, it exposed that she orchestrated the war in Libya to burnish her own credentials. So it was...
we have 5 seconds, Chris.
He
At Hugh, we're on a journey to put the
Слава Украине! Ребят, мое прошлое видео набрало почти 5 миллионов просмотров. Там я выключил комментарии, потому что очень много людей срутся. И русские, и украинцы. А то хочу сказать, что мы не воюем, мы защищаем нашу землю. Мы не нападали на русских. И мы хотим мира в своем доме и в вашем доме. Давайте без негатива. Главное, чтобы все вернулись домой живыми. Это главное.
Speaking of the walls.
We've been wanting to have him on for over a year, and he's a member. It's former Baltimore policeman Michael Wood is with us. Michael, how are you?
Great. Glad to be here with you.
First of all, you
Jimmy.
don't look old enough to be a retired cop, by the way. What are you? Are you aging backwards?
The Benjamin Button joke again.
Oh, have people made that joke?
Yeah, I've heard it before.
Oh, no kidding.
So, no, I'm not.
Actually, that's one of
regressing
the
in
few
age.
movies I've seen. I haven't seen many movies. That's one of them I've actually seen.
So-
It was sad at the end.
I am 36. So
You're 36 now.
I was old enough to do all those things that,
Okay.
we know I've done.
So now you were a Baltimore cop for 11 years, and you saw a lot of messed up stuff. And then the Freddie Gray thing happened, and did that make you decide to start talking more? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I mean, that was the essential aspect. Was I think I had that wall up to that distance, that it wasn't my people. It wasn't the people I was around. It was this distant thing that was happening in Cleveland or happening in Atlanta. It wasn't going to happen in this where I was, where it was a majority black department with a black commissioner and a black mayor and a black president. I mean, this wasn't going to happen in Baltimore. And then it happened in Baltimore. And I saw the unions and the police all stand up saying, we didn't do anything wrong. And it was like, wait. You put a grown man in a metal box, you kill him, and then somehow we're not, there's no scenario where we're not responsible. So if you guys are going to play this game where we have no accountability whatsoever, even if it goes this far, well, then I'm just going to start talking about everything that I've seen and participated in. And if I get in trouble for that or whatever, we're going to shine light because this has gone too far.
So when you say you're going to start talking about the things that you've seen and publicly, you started tweeting things.
Yeah, I just started tweeting, and I guess I was kind of venting. I was pissed. I was genuinely pissed that representatives of the FOP that I'm a member of.
The FOP is the union, the
Right.
Cop Fraternal Order of Police.
Right. So the president of this union that I'm a member of was representing peace and justice in that manner, and I said, "Fuck that."
So what is it about? Just very quickly, what is it about police union bosses that they're fucking maniacs?
Yeah, it's.
Like, I know I have friends. Like, now let me set the table. Now you know this because you listen to the show, but I come from a long line of cops, right? My grandfather was a cop, my dad was a cop, my oldest brother was a cop. Some of my best friends in Chicago are cops. So when I talk about cops being assholes, I know what I'm talking about, right? Because and by the way, when I say assholes, I don't mean to me. They're very nice guys to me, to their wives, to the Little League, to that. I'm just talking about when they get on the job. And they tell me stories. And most of them are racists, right? And there's varying degrees of racism, but they all have it. And so when this first started to come up, I started to be an on-air host for the Young Turks, the world's largest online news show. And this would come up. They like to do stories on the Young Turks about police brutality. And so I would start just to comment from my experience, from my life, and they were operating under the assumption of bad apple, bad apple. It's a bad apple. It's a bad apple. Every time there was, and I'm like, well, how many of these videos do you have to see? You guys are going to start believing me that most police officers are a half turn of the screw away from being criminals, if not already. They're pretty much criminal organizations in the same sense. So I would say things like that, and I would get reactions like, whoa, Jimmy, how can you say that? And I'm like, well, firsthand knowledge. What are you talking about? How can I say that? Firsthand. My neighborhood was all cops and firemen because they had a rule in Chicago that if you worked for the city, you had to live in the city. Now, in Los Angeles, cops can drive in from Simi Valley to Compton and be a cop there, which is a horrible idea. But in Chicago, you had to live in the city. That was a good thing. So all my neighbors were cops or firemen or criminals. All drug dealers, right? That was my neighborhood. My best friends were drug dealers. All their best friends were cops. And so I know what I'm talking about. And I'll just say one more caveat before we get more into this, is that I understand that there's a certain mentality of people who are attracted to police work, right? And we need those people. And I don't want to denigrate those people. I remember there a long time ago, probably 15 or 20 years ago, there was a big scandal in the Navy when some video came out about how they were hazing young officers. And they were hazing them, right? And they were like, can you believe what they said to these women? And I was like, yeah, these are trained killers. We're training them to kill people, and now you want them to fucking also be a gentleman and every said no, you can't have we need those people to be like that. We can't have a bunch of Phil Donahues out there fighting our wars for us, trying to talk to people on the battlefield. Hey, can we work this out? So I'm saying we need those type of people, but we need to keep them on a short leash. And that's not what's happening in America right now. So would you agree with any of that?
I agree with all of that, with a little bit of nuance about where you live.
Okay.
But with the entire mentality, I mean, we can't deny that in my case, I chose to be a police officer for the adrenaline rush. It is, sure, there's an element and a factor of doing good and that you're the good guy. But for me, it was the rush. I wanted the chase. I wanted to go after people. I kind of alluded to hunting, but it wasn't so much hunting because I didn't want to actually hurt them. It was like I was an outside linebacker, so I wanted the blitz and I wanted to get the quarterback, and I didn't want to hurt him because I kind of wanted him to get up so we could play again. And those are the kind of realizations that I made too. And when you talk about the military, so I went into the Marine Corps when I was.
Sorry, go ahead. It's 9 o'clock.
I went to the Marine Corps when I was 17.
Holy cow!
So just from a recent trip to Washington, D.C., I was looking at all the statues and the memorials and this glorification of war. And it's like, man, that's really fucking sick, because I was a 17-year-old trying to pursue college and a career, and I was poor. So the way that I had to do that was to go in and be a trained killer at 17. And then I do that for 4 years. I was in a fast team and an elite SWAT team. And I come back and go right into the police department. And it takes you a while to realize what has transpired in that manipulation.
What had transpired?
I became a servant of what I grew up opposing, the oligarchy, the dictatorship. I was carrying out the things that I thought were wrong.
Wow. And so, and it was the Freddie Gray moment that was your come to Jesus moment.
I mean, I should have had them many more times, but that was just seemed to be the broken straw, because Tamir Rice's murder just broke me down emotionally. And I couldn't believe that the nation as a whole, I couldn't believe that the citizens of Cleveland didn't burn that bitch down after that. I can't fathom how that didn't happen.
What does it take? So what do other cops, the Cleveland Police Department defends that shooting, and so does the police union chief, right? They defend that. In fact, they even said disparaging thing about the mother. So what do the majority of cops is the majority of cops when they watch that? Is there a majority of cops? Is there a typical reaction to that, or is it like half of them are on the side of the police union, or half of them? How would you break it down?
I think in policing and like the military, you kind of have a bit of like a Stockholm syndrome where you're empathizing with the oppressor. So they kind of build up a wall, and you play word games and mind games about what's actually happened. And I think the vast majority do think that's just a bad apple, and we maybe should go after that guy. But they forget, and they totally look past, like when Michael Slager killed in South Carolina, the other cop comes and says nothing about him planting.
So you're talking about when the guy was pulled over for a traffic violation, he had warrants, so he started running.
Right.
Right, but they weren't violent warrants. It was like a child back
who
payer.
cares? He's running anyway.
He's running away from the guy. Right. And he shoots him in the back, and just happened to be somebody had a cell phone and caught that, and that's how that came to light. So what you're talking about is then when he shot the guy, the other cop shows up and doesn't do a damn thing about it.
Yeah, and so what that also is going to tell you is that that's not the first time that's occurred. And we all know that, and we've all seen that, but we turn this blind eye to it, and it becomes what I was doing is thinking that guy was an asshole, and screw that guy that just did that, but I never said anything. I didn't do anything about it because you're going to ruin your career if you do it. But also, like, I wanted to be a cop. So that's not even on your option of lists of things you can do.
So we'll get into a few specifics. It doesn't give me any joy to talk about these things. Like, a lot of people think that Jimmy loves to rant about police brutality and everything, and it was just because of what it just emotionally takes me over, right? Not in a fun way and not in a way I want to be taken over by it. But the point I try to keep making, and I think now, at least over at the Young Turks, that they've come around, and a lot of other people are coming around, by the way, to that it's not a bad apple, that it's a culture, that even if you become a policeman for the right reasons, you either succumb to that culture or you leave. Right. And so now they're starting to understand, people are starting to get that. It's like, oh, so you could even be a good person.
Hello. Jeez, beats.
Pretty heavy duty stuff. I remember reading them, and it was jarring, right? So just, can you say a few?
Yeah, but was it jarring? I mean, like, I wasn't saying anything that you didn't know. I didn't say anything that wasn't in an NWA song 30 years ago. I didn't say anything that the black community hasn't been screaming out for the last 200 years. I didn't say anything. I was a pretty white boy with a badge, and that's what got the attention.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe that's why it was shocking to hear a white guy say it. Yeah, I guess you're right. We do hear black guys have been saying that stuff for a long time. And to see you say it, I remember one tweet, it was talking about how it was an innocent woman and you put your boot on her, but it wasn't your boot, but it was your handcuffs.
Well, there was two separate ones. So the first one was the woman that's the first one that sticks out in my head. Is I was a young officer, and she was walking out of a fried chicken place, and a detective was walking in. Well, she was looking at all the cars, because the cars park, and what do people do? They look at the cars, and the lights are on, and she bumps into him. He's just a plainclothes detective. And she was like, "Excuse you." It was a man bumping into a woman. Mm-hmm. That was kind of reasonable. Mm-hmm. And he just smacked her right across the face and was like, you don't talk to me that way. I'll take your ass to jail, kind of thing. And being a young officer, I just froze and got in my car and got the hell out of here. My philosophy at that time and thinking was that I wasn't here. I didn't see this. So, that's how you have it out.
So there was a cop just went and assaulted a woman for no reason in broad daylight.
It was nighttime,
and he wasn't afraid.
No, I mean, I was, you got to think I'm.
God damn it. And all right, I think it's on now. This thing is not working for me tonight. This is a battle uphill. If you happen to be on YouTube, come over, join us on Twitch. But thanks, good night.